Well, okay. So, if we're all turning, it is the start of Act 3, which is 74. Yep. Rain, can you shut the door for me? Okay. So remember that when we finished Act 2, Mary and Joe had decided to run away back to Northam. And so Act 3 is set in Northam, okay? And when they get back, I've highlighted this stage direction here. It says, a few burnt out relics of the camp remain. So the camp is burnt. Yep. Okay, boys, are you right? Okay. So basically the camp is burnt. Joe says they burnt everything, those bastards. He looks at the rubble. Okay. Do you know what rubble is, this word? Rubble? Rubble is if a building falls, the bits that are left is rubble. Let me just show you here. This is rubble. Can you see that? Yep. All of those are images of rubble. So there's nothing left, just rubble. Okay? And he says, we were just camped here. And now it's rubble. He leads Mary and says, see them rocks? We used to play in there. There was magpies. He sifts through the rubble and finds a rabbit trap. That's one of Dad's. And he finds a wine bottle, one of Uncle Jimmy's. Okay? And he keeps looking through the rubble. And she'd be real upset if she saw the place now, Gran too especially. He sees something and he says, oh no. It's like this is the worst. Okay, he saw the house was burnt, the rabbit traps were burnt, and here the worst thing, oh no, David's bike. Why would David's bike that's burnt be important or significant? Do you remember at the start? They actually fixed the bike, and that bike was nearly the cause of the fight, or was the cause of the fight between Sam and Jimmy. Okay? This bike is precious. It's symbol of hope for David and for the family. Okay? So just right, this bike is precious. It's a symbol of hope. Now when?
Why the bike is a symbol of the hope?
Maybe because it's something that they fixed themselves. David is an innocent child, so this symbolises his innocence as well because it's his special possession. Okay. So I've written a note at the front here. It was really clear to the audience and to Joe and Mary that although Mr. Neville said, look after their belongings, there was never any intention of allowing them to come back. They said it was temporary. Okay? When the natives were forced to leave, They said it was temporary. Do you want to know what temporary means? Temporary means short time only. But as soon as they left, they burnt their house, their belongings, their possessions. There was never any intention or plan to give the camp back. There was never any plan to let them come back to Northam. All right? Does that make sense? May I continue? All right. And Joe says they reckon they were going to look after everything we left behind. He says it'll never be like this, just about burning the camp or forcing them to move away. I think that this statement, it'll never be over, also refers to the conflict between white authority and Indigenous people. Joe says it will never be over. Okay, Mary says it's all over now, it's finished now. It will never be finished. The conflict between the white authority and the Indigenous people will never be over. I think that this quote, it is referring to, on the surface level, it's referring to the conflict about the camp. But on a deeper level, the audience can interpret it's also about general conflict between all Indigenous people and all white authority. Is that clear? Yeah. All right. So let's move to scene 2. Scene 2. They're in a street in Northam. Joe and Mary have all of their belongings and they see Sergeant Carroll. Hey, you're the Millie Mooras, aren't you, Joe? What you doing back in Northam? We're living here, he says. Who's this? Well, this is me missus. Right, this is my wife, my missus, me missus. Sergeant says, you can't go back to Government Well. Why did you burn everything for? We're simply following orders. Okay? And this is a theme we've seen before, that people just blindly follow orders. Don't question. Just do what they're told. Here, and this is important how you know that the bike is important. Because Joe's not saying, why did you burn the house? Joe is saying, why to burn a push bike? Okay? This bike is important. To burn my little brother's bike. Okay? I thought you was going to look after our stuff until we came back. All right? And Joe says, what about rations? But because there's no more natives, there's no more rations. Okay? And he says this statement, since all the natives have shifted out. Shifted out means moved. Have moved. Okay? Shifted out has a neutral tone. Okay? Neutral tone. Neutral tone. All right? We never shifted out. We was booted out. Okay? Booted out has an angry tone. Okay? Booted out means we were kicked out. We were forced out. We didn't want to go, they forced us to go. Okay, so the feeling in this word, we was booted out, is strongly condemning, strongly attacking this action. Okay, whereas shifted out has a neutral tone. Does that make sense? Okay? So Joe says, don't say we shifted out. We were never shifted out. We were booted out. You forced us to go. Yeah? Moving. All right. Scene 3. All right. right, let's come over here, page 77. Mr. Neville in Perth calling Sergeant Carroll, and Sergeant says there are natives, Joe Milimura and Mary. Okay, so he's telling Mr. Neville, yes, there are two natives here, Mary and Joe. Here. Now, okay, he says, we haven't had any bother with them. There's no problems with them. They're not collecting rations. Milimura is working. Okay, so he's got a job. They're not asking for rations. And Mr. Neville says, well, I've had 2 letters and the council's still adamant, which means strongly insists. Okay, so this is strongly saying that no natives should be here in the northern area. So the council says you've got to get rid of them. So Mr. Neville says, well, you better apprehend them. Apprehend means to catch, to arrest them. So you better arrest them. So what is he arresting them for? Well, Dagaru is a minor. That means she is under 18. And so Joe Milimura is guilty of absconding. Absconding has a word that means stealing and escaping. So he has stolen this woman, Mary, and escaped with her, which has 6 months jail. Okay, and let them know any northern people who are released from Moore River are not to return to the Northern District. So even though they said it's only temporary, you can come back after scabies, all right? We know they don't have scabies, but do they let them come back? No, because clearly it was never about that. All right. So now they ask the Western Australian Historical Association want Mr. Neville to present a paper. Okay. They all at the bottom of page say,
You should have her in the day, and now here I am.
are you looking for
Yes,
one
I
of
would like to speak to you.
Jack?
Hello, Jack. How are you? Come with me. Can I have you for about 2 minutes?
You can have him for longer if you need.
I might.
Ooh. So, a royal commission is a special investigation. Do you know what investigation means? So where it is like the biggest investigation a country can make, okay, special investigation. Some mob group, yeah, of women are kicking up. Kicking up means making a fuss, getting angry. So a group of women are getting angry about them being shifted out before the election. So there are a group of women who are getting angry about the fact that the northern Aboriginal people were forced to move. And now there's going to be a royal commission, a special investigation. Okay? But then he says they had a royal commission on natives about 30 years ago. A waste of bloody time, like the bloody referendum. They'll just put it in a filing cabinet and forget about it. Okay? There's no point in the investigation. Questions? So, for job. Sergeant under arrest under Section 12 of the Aborigines Act for absconding. absconding is escaping and stealing, yeah, from the Moore River settlement with Mary Duggaroo. Joe says, why are you worrying about us now? We've been back in Northern for nearly 2 months. Well, because Mr. Neville only contacted me this morning. What about Mary? Well, she's going to go back to Moore River settlement. Back to that bastard. Who's that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah? So they try and put handcuffs. You know what handcuffs are? These things that, yeah, they try and put handcuffs, and Joe says, you ain't putting that on me. Are you resisting arrest? No, I'm not. I just don't want them things on me. Don't put those things on me. I like the fact that Joe is now standing up against them. Reminds me a little bit of his uncle. Okay. And then Joe says, I'm not walking in front of you because you're not the sort of bloke, man, I want to turn my back to. I don't trust you. I want to watch you. I'm not going to walk in front of you because then I can't see you, I can't watch you. So they walk off side by side. Scene 5. This is the one that first time you read it, I bet you most of you just skipped it, because I did, because it was lots and lots of words and it looks scary. But we're actually going to read it today. And not only are we going to read it, but we're going to really try and analyse it, and we're going to write an analysis of it for homework. All right? Because it's quite interesting. And I'm not going to ask you to read every word, but I am going to ask you to focus on a few different parts here. Okay? So he is at the Royal West Australian Historical Society. Now, the first thing I want to say here is he's making this speech to the audience. Okay? So it is like, if you are sitting in the audience watching this play, it's like you were the audience in the Royal West Australian Historical Society. Okay? So you become involved in the play like you're a member of the play. This is a technique. The effect of this technique is that it is making the audience feel like you are involved in Mr. Neville's opinions. You're involved because you're participating and watching this speech. You're involved in his activities. Does that make sense? That somehow by being in the audience listening, you have this participation in what happened. Okay? So this speech is presented to the audience, which gives the audience the feeling like they were there and therefore participated in this crime. Yeah? Okay. So the first thing I highlighted is the words, the welfare of our Aboriginal and coloured folk. Inclusive language. Remember we did all of those persuasive language techniques? Trying to make the audience feel like they're our Aboriginal people. Mr. Neville is positioning himself as someone who cares about Aboriginal people. Yeah? Just like before, I'm so concerned. Okay? We really need to care about our Aboriginal and coloured folk. Okay? So this use of inclusive language, again, appeals to the audience, and it is trying to position himself as caring. All right? It's quite interesting here, the way of interpreting what happens in the rest of this speech. He then talks about the first days when Western Australia became a colony of, when white people first came to Western Australia. And he says, when white people first came to Western Australia, there was a guy called Captain Sterling. Do you see that? Yeah?
Jack wants to make me happy.
Is he going to make me happy too?
I don't know, but on Monday,
Yeah.
when I see Jack in class, he's going to bring me a present.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. Guess what that might be?
Yeah. Captain Sterling was the first white man who led the group of people to go into Western Australia. And one of his first acts, his first action, was to issue a proclamation. A proclamation is like a statement. He made a statement. Okay? And this statement if any person, okay, excuse me, alright, well, delete those so we can come again. If any person is convicted of behaving in a fraudulent, cruel manner towards the Aboriginal race, then this person, so if anyone is cruel to Aborigines or does something that's against the law to Aborigines, then this person will be prosecuted, arrested, taken to jail. Just the same as if this crime had been committed against any white person. Okay? That's basically what this means. So what he says, Sterling's Act, is that if there is any crime against Aboriginal people, it is the same as if the crime was against white people. The implication is that Aboriginal people and white people need to be treated the same. If you treat one badly, it's the same as treating a white man badly. You will be arrested, you will go to jail. So the law says cruel treatment of Aboriginal people is not allowed. Okay? So, what I'm starting to notice, their tone, Mr. Neville is having a tothy. It's interesting because as an audience, we have this irony. But Mr. Neville is presenting himself like he cares. Now, okay, I want you to come and have a look at this with me. All right. So, from the beginning, so now we're down here, page 81, we're starting from after the pause. From the beginning, the natives provided the settlers. Settlers are white people, right? From the beginning, the native people provided the settlers with bush food. So from the beginning, the native people helped the white people. They gave them food, they helped them explore. There was a happy relationship between white people, the settlers, and the blacks for 18 months. So now he's talking about history. In the beginning, the newcomers, so the white people, were yet to impress the blacks with the significance of their invasion. In November of that year, an Aborigine was shot while stealing flour. That was the beginning of the end. We might. I want to... Here. All right. Here we go. Okay. So here we go. So now, this is really interesting. There was from whites that drove native in. They moved the natives from the pressure from the whites, moved the natives, taking their waters. Naturally enough. Now this is a really interesting, can you see this here? Highlight it, guys. Naturally enough. This means understandably. All the spirits among the blacks resented this. So this means we can understand why the black people didn't like this. And we cannot wonder. Cannot wonder means of course. It is easy to understand why there were some murders of some isolated, a few whites during this period. Now, what I really want to focus your attention on here is the tone actually seems to be sympathetic and understanding towards the situation of the Aboriginal people. Naturally enough, it's understandable. We cannot wonder. Of course, we understand that. There was a murder of isolated whites, and then a heavy toll of black life. So lots of black people were killed in revenge. So I've written some notes here. It is not surprising. We cannot wonder. And these two phrases own of black people towards the Aboriginal people. On the 27th of October 1834, Governor Stirling led soldiers to the Murray River at Pinjarra. In the morning, they found a camp of 60 or 70 natives. So the soldiers were on positions on both sides of the river. It began to rain, and the soldiers opened fire. Bang, 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 bang. They opened fire. More natives appeared from their shelters. The men, the native men, defended themselves with spears. Okay, spears. You know what a spear is? A spear is a thing throw made of wood, and it looks a bit like this, and a person might hold it and throw it. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, but they usually throw it over their shoulder. Spears. They defended themselves with spears. When the women and children were trying to hide in the river, for 1 hour they had from both banks, from both sides of the river. The official estimate was 15 to 20 dead, but only 8 women and a few children were finally rounded up or found. So what is he saying? If there was only 8 women or children, then there was a lot more than 15 or 20 dead, wasn't there? Because there was 60 or 70 natives. So we assume that it might be 60 unofficially that died. So why is Mr. Neville telling this story? It really starts to sound like he does actually care or feel sorry. He's telling this history of something that happened. He's not hiding the history of murdering Aboriginal people. He's actually telling it, isn't he? It's odd, but interesting, and we have to interpret this. And I'm going to continue. He says, "One more word, and I shall have finished." When we talk about Australia's treatment of her Aborigines, we are apt to refer. This means we sometimes talk angrily. Scathingly means angrily. We talk angrily about Tasmania's harshness. Tasmania was wrong. So we sometimes say about how wrong Tasmania was in murdering all the Aboriginal people. Remember we talked about Tasmania's solution? how they killed all the Aboriginal people? Okay. In the first 70 years of settlement, 6,000 natives disappeared and only one was left alive. By the way, just out of interest, I told the other class this, I'll tell you guys. You know the suburb our school is in is called Truganina? The last Aboriginal from Tasmania, his name was Truganini. So this suburb gets its name from the name of the last Tasmanian Aboriginal woman, Truganini. So only one was left alive. So he's not hiding it. He's telling it. And in a way that seems like he cares. But here, in our West Australia, in our southwest of our state, we have an area that's twice as big as Tasmania. And in 72 years, our Aboriginal people used to be 13,000, and now we only have 1,419. So nearly 10,000 killed, and half of them were half-caste. So my question is this. How do we interpret Mr. Neville's speech? Think about it.
Kind of pretend to be friendly to Aboriginal.
Certainly, that's an interpretation is like pretending to care.
He going to hide the truth that why they moved to the Morira settlement.
I've written a little note here. He seems to recognise cruelty in the past. He seems to understand that these massacres were cruel, but he does not admit that the current cruel treatment is cruel. So it seems one interpretation. There are many interpretations you might think about. One interpretation might be that he's lying. He's pretending to care, but he doesn't really care. Okay? And certainly, that would be our initial interpretation because of what we've seen before. Our first interpretation may be that he's just pretending to care. But another interpretation may be that he sees that the past was cruel, but he's blind and does not recognise his own cruelty. That somehow he believes, truly believes, that he is protecting the Aboriginal people. Really interesting and difficult to know which is the truth. We don't have to know. We can simply go, there are some different ways we can guess or interpret this speech. You know? Some people may say, he's lying, he's pretending, he's just treating them like animals. You know? But other people might say, he seems to demonstrate some sympathy when talking about this situation. Therefore, it's even worse that he cannot understand his own cruelty in the present. So, I want you, your homework task, I'm about to stop this video. Did I actually start it again? Yes.